We're all familiar with the biblical stories of the many deeds and acts of salvation that God does from the very beginning of creation. And yet we see on this feast of the Holy Trinity that it's not so much about what God is actively doing in the world in a way that impacts history, but rather we are given a glimpse into the interior life of God. Yes, God not only acts externally, but has an internal life as well, just as we do. And so the message for this week of celebrating the Trinity is that it's important for us to attend to our interior lives as well, and to look at how the Trinity has growth in their own interior life. The first thing that we notice about the interior life of the Trinity is that each of the persons understands themselves as being loved. You'll recall that scene at the Jordan of John's baptism of Jesus. The heavens open and God the Father presents Jesus to the world and says, "This is my beloved Son." And Jesus tells us as well that he loves the Father. It's important for us in our own spiritual life to begin and anchor what we do, always on the understanding, the appreciation that we indeed are loved. So often in life, however, maybe because of our own mistakes and shame, we lose sight of that. Or maybe because the world wants a gauge of what really is of value and successful by the material things that one can accumulate or accomplish. And yet Jesus reminds us, as he draws us into the life of the Trinity, to begin and anchor our spiritual life on the deep conviction that we are loved by God each and every day, to take a moment in silence and hear God say, "You are my beloved child, in whom I am well pleased." When we do that, things go right for us. And the second thing we notice is that there is nothing that each of the divine persons do without doing it together. Even the creation of the world, we see that it is through the Word that the Father creates the world, and he breathes the Spirit over the world to create. It shows that our spiritual life also must understand that we are connected one to another, that we have bonds with each other, and we should do everything possible to make sure that there is no division in our world and in our relationships. And yet we know that there are so many people who are disconnected, unconnected, who are cast aside: the unborn, the undocumented, the unvisited, the unwelcome, the unemployed, and the undesirable. So often people are pigeonholed into those kind of categories that tell us they don't belong. But to really be a Christian, to be those who are disciples of Jesus, to live in the image of God, we must cultivate a sense of being bonded to one another and not have anyone cast aside or apart from the table of life. Our spiritual life must grow in developing those bonds with others. And finally, we see that what is a part of that divine life is the inexhaustible source of love, to the point that the Father gives everything over to the Son, and the Son returns it to the Father so that in the Spirit it can be poured out to us. There is that ongoing generosity, because love has that capacity to keep giving, to allow what we have never to be exhausted as we reach out to others in their need. Sometimes there are voices in the world that tell us that maybe we should just love our own, care for those who are within our circle. But again, that is not the way of the Trinity's love for the world and for ourselves. Rather, there is a firm belief that love never ends. So today we are invited to imitate the interior life of the Trinity. Yes, we celebrate the many acts in history that God has accomplished. But today we're drawn into that eternal life of the Trinity. The curtain is pulled back and we see what's happening in that internal life of God. And we, made in God's image and likeness, must also begin our own spiritual life, our own interior life, with a firm conviction that we are loved, to strive to promote ways in which we are better connected, but also never to hesitate to sacrifice for another, thinking that we'll run out of love, because love never fails. Love never ends.